You'll see Tommy Welsh and Jamesy O'Connor there looking ahead to the weekend as well. And here's Tommy, a quick clip from him on a ruthless mantra that he was taught when he was in school.
We had an old school teacher, Joe, in St. Kieran's College, Pat Murphy. I don't know, James, would you have come across him with Flannans, but Pat Murphy was a great hurling man from St. Mullins, taught in St. Kieran's when I was there. And he reckoned that you'd have to go for 5 goals maybe to get 2, but you have to go for them. If you don't go for them, you won't get them. And goals win matches. I remember I think he was over one of the St. Mullins' team one day. I don't know, it was an underage team or that, Joe, but at half time he said he started getting embarrassed. I think they scored 9 goals and no points. So he had to tell him at half time, lads, he just started taking a few points anyway.
And Tommy, did Cody preach goals? Was he like, would he talk about goals? Would he talk about going for it, Cody, or was it just, was instinctive to the players he had?
It kind of a bit of both. Like, the chance was on, but there was one funny one time. He I think we were trying to force these goals one time, and Brian Cody said, "Right, lads, go for your pints now." He said, "Sunday, if the chance comes on, just take your pints," because we were in a bit of a lull and we were trying to force it. But DJ was on the team that time. He said, "Well, if I get the ball, I'm going for goal."
He's allowed.
He's allowed, and Cody didn't say that to him because he respected. Listen, he knows more than any of the rest of us. But no, he definitely left it up to you. But
right.
It was in your heads because of the lads around you more so than anything else.
Yes, I hear what you mean.
And Joe, take it from me, right? When DJ got a goal, it was worth a lot more to them than the 3 points that were up in the scoreboard.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, very few people I'd say who could argue with Cody, DJ amongst them, and Tommy himself, definitely from everything you hear, also among that group. Paddy Stapleton, good morning to you.
How you doing, Adrian?
Flying, and thanks. Really looking forward to these games now at the weekend. So we're going to kick off with the game at Croker tomorrow evening, 6 o'clock. Kilkenny up against Waterford. I know when we were chatting to you a couple of weeks ago, you were talking about how much of a fan of Liam Cahill you are, and you were proved right, obviously. Is it also, though, a case from a Waterford point of view almost that they're in bonus territory, Paddy, that like they haven't necessarily beaten any of the serious All-Ireland contenders, and even though Kilkenny are a bit of a work in progress themselves, that they'll have enough old foxes on the pitch to see off Waterford?
I wouldn't think so. I honestly wouldn't. And most of the time, if you ask the Waterford player, maybe if it was another year, they'd say, oh no, but they really would be in bonus territory. I really don't think they are. I wouldn't say Liam Cahill ever thinks like that. I can see the way they're playing. They know that this is, it's time to strike while the iron's hot. They haven't won an All-Ireland since it's a 59. Or no, sorry, more than that actually. But so, no, I think they know this is their shot at history. Limerick are obviously that team that look a little bit ahead of everybody, but I don't think they're intimidated by any of the other teams. I actually don't think they feel any other team can beat them. I think they're coming into this match against Kilkenny, which sounds ridiculous, but in a very confident mood. And actually, they only have Liam Cahill with them a few months, but they actually seem a way more settled system, a way more settled team than Kilkenny do, even though Kilkenny won the Leinster final. So I'd say Waterford see this as a real chance, because on the off chance, Galway, Limerick, the other side, it could actually be very tight. So if depending on what way that goes, I'd say Waterford see it as a huge chance.
What was your record like against Kilkenny?
My record was up and down now, to be honest with you. Obviously, we won in 2010, but bookended then in 9 and 11 with losses, and the 11 one kind of stung because it's one of those where I'd say we were a little bit soft coming in that year. We just hadn't been properly tested. Maybe the semi-final when we hammered Waterford in 11 in the Munster final. I'd say some of you might remember our Carbeck got 4 goals, but that softened us out, I thought, for the year. But apart from that, they beat us more than we beat them, unfortunately. But you just have to roll with that one.
Yeah, the reason I ask is the jersey factor, right? Like, people often talk about this, the black and as soon as players see the black and amber, they're already beaten, or there's like a significant sort of, it has an impact. Was that a thing for you when you played them?
I don't think so. I think I'd say when Liam came in first, Kilkenny were probably beating Tipp a lot in league games, and we didn't get that far in the championship. But after that, we suffered one bad beating in a league game in 09. That probably met us. It brought us to the level of intensity, because we actually were such a fright that day in the first half in Nolan Park. But certainly wasn't it. I think, if anything, it made us better. Now I just think a lot of those close games, if you think about a lot of our leaders, apart from, we had Lara and Owen, we're a bit older than that, but our real young players, Brendan Maher, Paddy Maher, like they were 20, 21, 22. playing these guys who are at the peak of their powers, who are generational greats or all-time greats. So I think at the time they just had that little more know-how, a little more experience. And you know, when it comes down to the last 10 minutes of game and it's close, that's where it's won and lost.
Yeah. And like when you talk about that Waterford settled system versus what's going on with Kilkenny, and there's obviously he's quietly bubbling away, a new era of players there, Brian Cody. How do both of those then stack up tomorrow night?
I think it's unbelievably interesting. I think number one, the two managers themselves, like I really see this as, I think Liam Cal, you don't disrespect Brian Cody what he's won, but mentality wise, it's probably the closest we've seen to Brian Cody in the modern era, and we all felt, well, you can't have another Cody because, you know, that doggedness, you know, a lot of the former players have come out and say how tough he is and how distant he is. So I think that's fascinating on its own, you know, two real tough men. I think the fact that Waterford run the ball a lot, we talked about Kieran Bennett in the middle of the field, Ty DeBorca, Calum Lyons, Bennett, they run the ball. They seem to take like that extra, maybe we give out to a young lad for doing it, taking an extra 3-4 steps with the ball, having a little look up, but it's all to draw out the other defenders and maybe make a good ball for Hutchinson inside. So Kilkenny usually don't deal unbelievably well with that. And in fairness, they don't deal brilliantly with tactics in general. So I see Waterford have a slight edge in that way. And if you look at the full back line for Kilkenny, it's pretty inexperienced. If you have Tommy Walsh in there, Hugh Lawler obviously had a good season last year, but they're not, you know, Conor Delaney had played league last year but hadn't really played too much championship. So it is, you know, if ball goes in good the way the Waterford guys wanted, then it is advantage Kilkenny. But the only other thing I see on the other side is you have two, you know, you have TJ Reid and you have Colin Fennelly, and they can break any code really in certain matches. And the interesting thing for me is TJ Reid, will they put him on Ty DeBorca centre forward and really mess up what Waterford want to do because he's such a linchpin, or will they put him in corner forward? Like that's the two spots I see it. Will they put him corner forward on either Kenny or McNulty? And they're really inexperienced. Like you know, the typical Cody thing, put Shefflin in on the inexperienced corner forward. They have two. So you have a problem there. Will he disrupt the centre forward position and DeBorca, or will he really try and hammer in on them cornerbacks?
That's a really interesting dilemma. So what would you do if you were Brian Cody, and what benefit would putting Reid on Ty DeBorca have for a team?
Well, putting him on Ty DeBorca means you either hope Ty DeBorca can do both jobs. Like you saw the last day when Tony Kelly started centre forward, that there was a vacated hole there. And like Kilkenny like nothing more than a vacated hole in the middle of the defence, and Fennelly is the one inside it. So that's a really, really tough problem. I would definitely use him at different positions. I definitely maybe even start him centre, try and get a good start for Kilkenny, try and get Ty DeBorca out of his rhythm. But I'd certainly have him in corner forward at some stage, because as good as the defenders are, they're young. Maybe not babies, but in terms of intercounty hurling, they're very, very young. And he's so tricky, TJ Reid. Just even in the air, if they just hit a few high balls in, he's unbelievably tricky. He's long. He's able to use his body. So they have a real dilemma. Maybe Callum Lyons will come and mark him everywhere. But that presents its own problems. Do they have to play with a sweeper then as Ty DeBorca? And does that mean less ability to work hard up in the forward line? So I find it extremely interesting.
Have you marked TJ?
Yeah. I even marked him the club championship this year. He's unbelievable. And that's the word for me, tricky, because he's not the fastest. He's pretty strong, but he's not Johnny Glynn, like, you know, he's not that type of strength, like, but he's tough, but the skill is tough. But look, I prefer marking him as a cornerback, fullback than I would in the half forward line. When he's played against us half forward, he moves so well. The ball is pucked down on the other area, and he just swoops in around, little looping around. And look, when he gets it, I think you're in real trouble. And I suppose I realised that when I marked him in the club championship. So I wasn't really trying to hurl the ball now, I must admit.
So is that the same advice you'd give to Waterford this weekend? Don't hurl the ball.
I think if you could, against TJ Reid, even Fennelly is such a game breaker, like, and but TJ Reid, yeah, look, just keep him out of the game, and let the other five backs worry about hitting the ball and supplying the forward line. I think if TJ Reid and Colin Fennelly, if they don't hurl well, if you limit them, then Kilkenny will find it very, very hard to win. But I do think, not changing it too much, but Prunty against Fennelly didn't have a good game the last day. He won like that. And Prunty didn't have a great game the last day. And I think it's a similar challenge as this time, where a man like Fennelly is so strong, like probably one of the strongest lads I've ever come up against. And now Prunty has to try and learn from last week, where he realises he's not always the strongest dog in the fight, and balk and limit Fennelly, or he'll go out and maybe make a couple of the same mistakes, which is trying to outstrength him. And that to me is very interesting as well.
Yeah, and Waterford do seem to be hurling a bit more than they maybe had in previous years as well, so it'll be interesting to see how all that pans out. Over to Sunday, Paddy, Limerick against Galway. You mentioned there in a sort of offhand way maybe about Johnny Glynn, but we've spoken before about the physicality of this Limerick team. Are Galway the best matched team in the country then to take them on physically?
They should be. They worked hard the last day against Tipperary, but Tipperary still got plenty of ball off and plenty of ball through the hands, and I don't think this was the best version of Tipp that could have been there this year. So I would have thought so. But now they're 3 weeks into their schedule. It's going to be a tough day for them. If you look at it, Limerick are probably that bit fresher in terms of years anyway, and now we have 3 weeks of action on top of that. So my look at this is if Galway don't get off to a very, very smart start, it could actually be a long day for them, because there's only so much you can do with the best will in the world. But if the body and the head is telling you you're tired, then you could be under pressure. And I know people say, well, it's not Ireland semi-final. Unfortunately, the body doesn't know that, and they need a quick start. Limerick are so slick, and I just see it. If Galway could come out with a real, hunger after 2017 All-Ireland, but it's going to be tough for them after that few weeks.
Where are the weaknesses in that Limerick team?
Jeez, that's a fair one. I suppose we've all trying to talk where are the weaknesses. I suppose one thing I noted is they don't really look to man mark. They really trust their system, a la kind of a Dublin football type thing, where they feel if they go out and hurl that there's no one beat them, and I think they're not too far off the mark. But I do feel like Galway have the type of player that would enjoy if it was hurling against hurling. Like Joe Canning doesn't really want to be man marked. He wants to let his skill show, and he's not extremely fast, so it could be man marked. Carl Mannion around the middle of the field doesn't want a lad trailing him all day, and they can all shoot. So I see that as a little bit of a weakness. If Galway can get on top, if they can overarm like Kilkenny did last year, but unfortunately for Galway, Limerick have that experience. The only other one thing they have is, as I talked to you before, Seamus Flanagan doesn't really start. I thought he was good when he came on the last day, and if they get in a bind, they don't really have that high option. Yes, Gillette, but against Dahi Burke, I don't see him maybe catching ball or winning ball as easily as he has other days. So there are a couple of chinks, but you're kind of you're still reaching.
Yeah, and in terms of the dynamic between the two teams, obviously people remember the game a couple of years ago like a bit of a mad game, but certainly a bit of a mad finish anyway. Is there just so much water under the bridge between now and then? And like Galway, you've mentioned before, they're playing a different game, they're under new management, like that there isn't much to look at in terms of that game, in terms of what we can expect now at the weekend?
Yeah, I'd say there's not too much, to be honest. Like that day, Limerick were probably a 10-point better team, and they won by a point barely at the end to rely on Joe Canning missing a score. But I think their confidence has grown exponentially since then. I think they're so sure of what they're doing. Even a couple of the matches that year, they were definitely in danger of being caught in the semi-final. So since that, they've really kicked on. Bar that, they'll be crushed by that All-Ireland semi-final last year. They know they had a chance to go back-to-back. So I don't see them letting up for a second. And they probably see maybe a wounded animal in Galway, a couple of weeks on the road, new management. They are vulnerable, I think, Galway. So Limerick, I think they have a good mentality, and I think they'll see that. So I don't think they're going to be, held up over a couple of years ago. Maybe Galway might see it as something. It might be a way for the management, for Shane O'Neill, to get Galway really focused in this week and to get that good start. Like, people just think you automatically come out in the championship match and you're so motivated that you'll have that start, and sometimes you're not. You need a little prod, especially after a couple of weeks. So I think maybe Shane O'Neill, they might be able to use it. But as I say, they need to get that really fast, energetic, strong start, intense start. And if they do, look, then they have a chance. But if they don't get that, they're in serious trouble, I think.
Sounds like you're going for Limerick.
I am going, and I do. And I was saying why. Overall, I do think they're the better team. I'm sure most people do. I really do. And then you add on top of that they've a couple of weeks rest, only 2 weeks, but they're still in the groove. So I would have to go with Limerick. I think most people would.
And on the other side, which way?
The other side, Yeah, I'm just going to go with the form team, and even though the Leinster champions, it's hard to back against them. I just think that Waterford are on that momentum. They have that momentum. It's so hard to break in sport, especially hurling, when you have to be in a rhythm to get breaks of balls, when everyone has to work in a chain to work so hard. And I think Waterford just had that groove. It's like a groove, and Cal has them in it. But I really think, and I think they see this as their chance, because they didn't win the Munster final. Maybe if they had won the Munster final, they'd be a little bit soft going into this. But that's been able to be held over them. So I'm certainly going to go for Waterford, even though it's hard to back against some of the Kilkenny players. But I just will on this occasion.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, listen, they're a cracking couple of games, and I'm really looking forward to them. We'll catch up with you hopefully again. They're not too distant. Thanks, Millie, Paddy.
Cheers, guys.